All right, so it's my first time here in front of this group, in person anyway. I think I spoke a few years back during COVID remotely. But my name is Tim Mangan, Team Immersion Technologies. Been around doing this whole space for a long time, having built the original SoftGrid product that Microsoft bought and renamed as AppV. And over the last 6 years, have been heavily involved with trying to get MSIX to work as well. All right. So one of the things that I wanted to be sure to cover, because nobody really talks about this, is why enterprises repackage applications. So I asked AI to help me with this photo. This is the best it could do. And it really comes from a training class that I was doing just earlier this year. So I was at a large organization, and they wanted to move from AppV to MSIX and asked me to come in and do a private on-site training. They had 17 people in that class, very large class, biggest class I've ever done. And on the first day, about 9:30 in the morning, the IT director came into the room and said, we're gonna have to put this class on pause. We have an IT fire, and the only people in the company that know how to deal with it are here in this room right now. So they all then disappeared for about an hour, and they came back and the problem was solved. So what was the problem? Well, the problem was, this is not quite catching. Maybe if I go a little higher. Oh, it was okay? Okay. All right. I felt like I was getting about half my words that I was hearing. Okay, good. So what was the problem? Well, the problem was that the organization, the desktop engineering group, owned 301 applications. That number should have been 302. They had an in-house application which was mission critical. 30,000 people in the organization, 20,000 people used that application every day to do their job, which was basically to regulate a portion of the financial industry. And they were not doing their job that morning because the tool was down. The tool was a desktop app. The desktop engineering team owned that application, but they did not own the browser it ran in. That was app number 302. And apparently the predecessor to the IT director had set up an arrangement where that one just went native in the operating system, and it was allowed to update whenever the vendor updated the software. And last night, the vendor updated their software and it broke their application. So what happened? Well, it was running under Citrix. They pointed to the Citrix guy. Citrix guy looked, said, nope, no problem here. Pointed to the web developer guys. Web developer guys said, hey, everything's here, got to be the database. Database guys said, no, it's got to be the network. Network guys said, ain't us. Where does all shit fall? The desktop engineering team. So they had to go figure this out and find out that, in fact, this is what happened. And they downgraded the app and got everybody up and running and learned their lesson. So now there's 302 applications that they're responsible for. And this is what I find in enterprises. They are scared of that type of unscheduled change happening. And that's why they're repackaging most of the applications that they're doing today. It isn't necessarily to go to a particular format, although a lot of organizations will do that, particularly with the non-persistent VDIs, or as I like to refer to it, semi-persistent RDS server, where the app may or may not be there, where you want to have that fast publishing time, right? Okay. So why are we interested in MSIX? And this is actually the exact same talk that I gave last month in the Netherlands when I was talking all about MSIX. But I'm going to have to sprinkle in some AppV into this one now. So bear with me as I shift on my feet. So why do we do this? MSIX gives you that guaranteed clean install and uninstall. Does AppV do that? Mostly, okay? There are a few little exceptions. We occasionally will have a problem where another application comes in and you get a little conflict, like on the file associations or something like that, or you happen to just lose your shortcuts to the desktop for the applications once in a while, so you have to do some repair there. With MSIX, we really don't see that happening. It is very clean, and it is nice, because one of the big differences between those two technologies is when AppV takes the information from the AppX manifest file and says, I want to integrate this to the user, they're writing that information in the same locations the traditional app would have written them. They're actually placing an LNK file in the start menu folder for the user. They're actually writing into the HKey current user classes key to put the file associations and the COM objects that are getting externally exposed in the packages. Whereas in MSIX, everything is in a isolated, separated area when that publishing happens for that package. So all of those settings are kept separate, and that keeps you from having a little bit of conflict that can occur on that case. Is it the type of thing that should happen normally in your organizations? Do you have those problems? No, but it does happen. But both of those technologies are great for that purpose of making sure that when you put that app down, it is going to work. And that when other things happen on the system, it should still continue to work. What's the second piece of it? The second piece has to do with when you have these applications, and you have things in them. And I'm sorry, every application has security issues. Even if the vendor is absolutely perfect in everything that they do, they write their software based on framework components or the VC runtime libraries, and those things end up with vulnerabilities over time. When that happens and you have isolation going on, AppV, MSIX, both, you are a little bit more protected. Is it a security layer? Absolutely not. But are you at least a little more likely to not have a huge problem? Yes. It's harder for that problem to jump from one application to the other or to the main system itself. Things that you would normally worry about, Java, all of its flaws. By isolating it, we can make sure that that user, when they're using the Java web browser for that one thing they have to do, that we take away all the Chrome around the edges of the browser so they can't go browse anywhere else. So the only thing they can do is hit that one HR website that needs the old crappy version of Java, and they can do nothing else from that shortcut. Help keep you more protected. Isolation becomes really important. Okay, so I tweeted this out a while back, and I guess I have to sort of take that away now. Damn, there goes my retirement money. That's all right. All right, so MSIX has been a struggle. There is no doubt about that. This is from a presentation I gave the first year that MSIX was out about the application compatibility. As you can see, that number up there in the green isn't very big. It says 9%. That's what I was measuring during that first year. The package support framework technically existed, but you couldn't use it unless you wanted to pull out your own personal copy of Visual Studio and compile it and build it yourself and add those components into your package. That's why the number was so low. So we've come a long way. Okay. Now, when I talked about the package support framework, if you're not familiar with that, AppV does a ton of remediation built into the client itself. When it came to MSIX, Microsoft decided not to do that and instead created this package support framework as a way to do that. And so we take these components, and in between the application and the operating system, we'll put a shim in there that changes the behavior of the application calls. This is the same thing that in the case of AppV. It's done in either the DLL injection that they put into the process itself or in the VFS layer of the filter driver system. But here in MSIX, we do it ourselves with a DLL injection. And we use the PSF to do that. And that helps us an awful lot. Okay. The other thing that's happened over the last 6 years has been that Microsoft has been extending the capabilities of what MSIX can do. This happens through a bunch of extensions in the AppX manifest schema. I've shown you here, there's a ton that they've done. Now, for you to make use of that, there's more that has to happen. Number one, they need to implement those changes into the operating system, and you have to actually deploy that version of the operating system. So that's taken some time for those things to get through. And we also have to get those things into the packages. And when it comes to getting them in the packages, Microsoft hasn't been keeping up to date with any of this stuff in the packaging tool itself directly. And so we end up going in and fixing those things up to give us the fuller capabilities that are available. So this is from 2019. So this is kind of halfway along the way here. I did some more measurement. I create this thing called the MSIX report card. You can find up on my website, teamergent.com. And roughly at the end of January each year, I release a version of this report. And I go through some testing about how capable MSIX is. And so I take a whole bunch of enterprise applications. Right now, my list has 120 from various things I've seen from customers over the years. And I run it through the whole mill and try to see, is this application going to be acceptable? Now, my level of criteria on this is I refer to as the high fidelity model. And that means that everything works the way the original product worked. If you had a user who was using the natively MSI installed version of it and you swapped it out with this package, would they notice the difference? If the answer is no, it's green. So I use a very strict criteria on this. So this is something that I brought in because, not because of the mixed year, but because of the way I broke this out. As we were looking at these applications, what we found is that we'd have something that didn't work. And then we'd bring in the PSF or one of these other fixes, and we'd see if it worked. And a lot of times, particularly early on, the app still didn't work. Because what we were seeing was the first problem the app had. And once we fixed that, there were other problems behind it. So this sort of showed, as I looked at these applications, there were about 42% that I could find that, hey, they need some type of fix from the PSF. But it didn't mean that they were going to be good apps at that point. But there were still an awful lot that we had no clue about. And so we've continued to progress this over time, which is good. So this is from 2021. We were almost up to 60% app compatibility from the testing. So we were improving quite a bit. Now, notice the yellow and the blue there. Those are subjective areas. So green means absolutely perfect. Red means not a chance. It does not do the basic functionality of the application. The blue and the yellow mean it might be good enough for you. It's going to be subjective based on your organization and how picky they are, and or do they happen to use that particular feature. And I kind of break it down, and the blue says, yeah, you're probably going to like this app. And the yellow says, yeah, you're probably not. But not every organization is going to come up with the same answer. The black one was, I couldn't actually get a package out of the Microsoft packaging tool. There is no black anymore, by the way. They have the latest versions always seem to make a package. So now it's red. Okay, so this is from the January report card. Okay, and so I also brought up here, I'm showing you my AppV numbers associated with as well. Because AppV does have higher level compatibility. There is no doubt. But I measure AppV. In this case, I measured at 91% because, quite frankly, I was lazy. My standard number for AppV on compatibility is 98%. But I had gone in and I had updated the versions of several applications when I ran these tests. And I only ran them once through AppV. I didn't even try to troubleshoot them. So, you know, your number can be wherever in there. But it's definitely better than we got with MSIX, where we got to the 92%. Where are we now? So I did a lot of work this year. So one of the problems that I've had with the AppX manifest file has to do with the COM objects. So the COM objects all need to get taken from the native install type of thing into the AppX manifest. And the way Microsoft designed the AppX manifest was, well, I'm in a Microsoft building. I have to be nice, right? Obtuse.
This is the first time for everything.
Obtuse. Tucson might be the right answer. It has a hierarchy, which is actually kind of upside down from the way the traditional application did it. And if I were a Microsoft developer and I wrote my code, I would write it in a way that it would work in that manifest. But that's not what vendors do. Vendors do things like, oh, I've got 2 applications in my package, and I have a file type. So what would be a good app? What would be this? Fiddler. Fiddler is a great app for this. Got 2 applications in there, and they have a scripting thing where you could kind of, Fiddler is it's sort of like a Wireshark, okay, to do sniffing of the traffic. And you have the ability to go in and do a capture into a script that you can then replay to replay that web traffic, all right? And so they have a file type associated with that. But the file type in its registration natively has 2 shell commands, one to open and one to run to the same file type. In the AppX manifest file, you cannot do that because the hierarchy starts with application and then file type and then the verb command you want to put. But you can't put the same file type under 2 different applications. So you only get one of those 2. So what I finally came to the conclusion this summer was, well, Microsoft is apparently not going to change that, but I can change the way that we use the manifest. And so I reorganized the way I put the information in there. And basically I end up with a dummy application in there. And I take all of the file types and all of the shell extensions and all of the COM objects and push them all into one place so that I get rid of this uniqueness problem that they created inside the manifest rules. Now, they never did that in AppV. They didn't have this uniqueness stuff, but that's the way they did it there. And so we've had to invent these kinds of ways to improve that compatibility. So where does that end up taking us today? So this is another chart that's in there showing you what's happened over time. The 2 green columns are the bottom green column. That's the straight out of the Microsoft MSIX packaging tool without trying to do anything fancy. And then this is bringing in the PSF and any other fix-ups that I've been doing through my tooling that we use to fix up those packages. So the main part of this is from that January report. I sort of hand drew in the numbers from my last round of testing last month with the changes that I've put in this year. And so, we're kind of at this point at that 90% mark in compatibility. So we're starting to get closer. And I feel like 90% is not good enough, but it's good enough to say, yes, you can go with this route. Okay. All right. This is another chart that I've used at a number of different conferences. And I got to say, this is not a scientific chart. There's no measurements that are on there. This is Tim just drawing lines on a piece of paper, okay? But I've gotten a lot of good feedback from folks in the space that have said, yeah, we think you kind of nailed it with that one. So what is this chart trying to tell me? It's trying to tell me how much work it is to get these applications in addition to can you. And just start with that MSI line, right? So with MSI, it takes a while to produce that package. You need someone that knows how to do all of that cleanup because you're taking something, capturing on one machine, and any garbage it picked up, you're depositing on another machine, and you got a good chance of breaking stuff. That MSI curve requires someone to have probably 5 years of packaging experience to be able to hit these type of time frames. Okay. Look at the AppV line, right? The AppV line, first of all, for the most part, it's less time. You don't need that level of experience. By the way, the AppV line I drew here assumes 1 year experience in packaging in AppV. We don't worry about all of that cleanup. We don't have to spend the time doing that. Can you do the cleanup? Absolutely. Do you have to? No, it's isolated. So it's okay. It's not going to break something else by putting this package on the system. But there's some apps we can't do, right? And that's the trade-off there. You can see my MSIX line. So this is from 2019, first time I did this drawing. And you see there's some apps that they're just good apps, you know? You just boom, package them up, they're going to work. But if they didn't work, oops, I guess I hit a button there. There's this bump that's out here, right? And that time in between really means I packaged up the app, I tested it, it didn't work, I debugged why it didn't work, and I found something with the PSF that I could fix it. Okay. But there's still a lot of apps I can't do. So what do we do about that over time? I spent a lot of time improving the package support framework so we can increase the size of that bump. So that's where I started in 2010. 2010? 2020. I spent a lot of time doing that. But then I also, the following year, said, let me spend some time left shifting. Let's try to make it easier to do that. The first versions of my tooling were pretty much, you had to go debug and then add those pieces in, right? And so we started left shifting, making it a little bit easier, finding the things that we commonly needed to do. And what I started doing with the tooling, so this started with PSF tooling, which is a free tool that works inside of the Microsoft MSIX packaging tool. And what I do is I analyze all of the stuff that we can see of what the installer actually put down in the system, and then compare it to what we know about the capabilities of MSIXR and try to make that happen. Now, in the case of PSF tooling, we still depend on the Microsoft packaging tool to create the final package. So ultimately, that was limiting us. And after 2021, I started creating a separate tool called TM-EDIT-X. And so what we do is we let the Microsoft tool do what it can do and be good at that. And then after it's created the package, we then pick that package up, run that same analysis, because we can still see everything the application put down because it's still there in the package. And then we can do the full set of things, not only bringing in the package support framework, but also all of the other new extensions that the packaging tool would never have put in that package. And so that's allowed us to continue to move this further and further to the left and increase the capabilities, the application compatibility. And this is sort of where I draw this today. So this whole first lump here represents about 70% of the applications that you can pretty easily package them up. And quite frankly, until last Sunday when I did a new release, easier than AppV even. Okay. So when we do AppV, I had a similar strategy there where we have the Microsoft AppV sequencer. I've got a thing called TM-EDIT, which would open up and fix up the package for some things like the sequencer messes up short names for some packages, right? And so we would fix those things up so your application could work. And we do a lot of other stuff to just optimize your package for you. In the release I had a TM-EDIT last Sunday, I actually brought in sort of the automation that we've put in the TM-EDIT-X program, brought that over to TM-EDIT. So we're now kind of on parallel. I actually sort of left shifted this yellow line a little bit for those applications that need those things. Now the hump that's there is still, okay, I tried all the stuff that you said, Tim, and it didn't work. Now I got to go debug that application. And that's where we get that next 20%. So we can do 70 pretty easily. 20%, yeah, we got to do a bunch more work. And then we still have that other 10% that we just plain can't do. Okay. So that's sort of where we are at. So this slide just sort of shows you a summary of how we would be doing this. In the case of AppV, we're starting with the AppV sequencer and then running TM-EDIT if you want to. It'll do that analyze. It'll do package cleanup, some automated stuff you can do in there, and apply other fixes of things that we know that the sequencer isn't doing correctly. I also had a free, I still have a free tool called AppV Manage that a lot of folks who are doing this work would use. And that's used by the packager after they've created the package to help quickly deploy the application, test it, give them some debugging tools to use against that package. So in the case of MSIX, everything kind of runs parallel. We've got the Microsoft packaging tool or other packaging tools that are out there. We'll use TM-EDIT-X to do all the analysis to clean up and add these other fixes up. And unlike TM-EDIT, which I think you can live without, I mean, I think I have a lot of customers that are using it and plan on depending on that and running every package through it. TM-EDIT-X, quite frankly, I think you kind of need that to be able to produce good MSIX packages. And then within TM-EDIT-X, there's a piece called MSIX Deploy, which is the equivalent of the AppV Manage program. So it'll allow you to just quickly drop that thing in. Even if you're doing app attach, TM-Edit can do the conversion to app attach format, and it can locally on your system deploy the app attach piece, and you can test it there and make sure that everything's working. Yeah, they did. Well, guess what? What do you think this thing's using? But I'm giving you a button. I'm giving you a button. I don't have to type PowerShell. No, you don't. read the fine print. It's in the yeah. All right. So I do have a demo of the TM-Edit piece here working. And you're going to make me click something, aren't you? Yeah. All right, so this is TM-Edit X. I'm going to come in and just to show you, we got a whole bunch of options so you can sort of control how you want to do the packaging and how you want to do the fix-ups. But I'm just going to go in and open a package here. I'll start with a simple one with 7-zip. Fairly straightforward application. What we have is we have a number of sections here that's telling you the results of the analysis, things that we're recommending and not. And generally, you kind of work from the top down, but we've got to just do all the default stuff. Just a quick button that says, this is what I want to do to try to get that 70% is probably right. We have some available fixes that are available in there as well for special case situations. So for example, we were talking over, somebody I was talking with today and had an application and the DLL wasn't get found. And even with the fix up for that, it didn't get found because that vendor uses a weird API. And so we've got a thing in there to just do a copy. And it solves the problem. The app finds the DLL. This is a new thing that I added in September, which is the analysis report file. So we now actually show you, here's all of the things that the application wants in terms of integrations for the end user. All of the file types, and if there are any shell extensions, if there are any protocol handlers, which could be useful for your UAT test to be sure that they're covering all of the things that end users might want to have. Show you what the results of the analysis were, and then any changes that were made in using the tool, show you what actually changed in the package. Okay, so at that point, it's going to save off the package and sign it. The tool is supporting the straight sign tool with your private certificate, the DigiCert key locker service, the DigiCert token service, not Azure device guard, Azure code signing, because they still haven't given me the API I need. I have special needs.
I'll fix that for you, Tim. Don't worry about it.
Okay, great. All right, so this is a bigger package. This is Adobe Reader. Now, Adobe Reader is a weird piece of software because it's been around for so long. And it turns out they're doing some things. I actually have a section at the bottom of the analysis of things I'm not going to fix. And Adobe Reader has a few of those because they're putting down things in their installer that they don't use. And sometimes they're incomplete. Okay, like they put it down a registration for a COM object, and they no longer deposit the DLL for that COM object down on the system. Right? So, and then they have a search handler that goes back to Windows XP, and it got deprecated. No longer works as of Vista and on, but they're still putting the DLL down and they're registering it. But I can't put it in the AppX manifest file because there is no place for it there. But it'll go in. So we got some cleanup that's in there. We're detecting uninstallers, so we're going to remove those, whether they were shortcuts or just files in there. We just take those out. It'll show you that we need the package support framework in there and why. Here are the shell integrations that the packaging tool was missing. So if an application has multiple commands with the same file type, the packaging tool will have skipped those. We have a shell extension here of a preview handler type, and the packaging tool doesn't do that. So we add that in. A lot of the COM stuff that is being ignored because they couldn't figure out how to fit it in. Once we do the fix up on the PSF, we can now fit all of those things in and add them in. And you can see there's some other things that are in there as well. And that's really how we're going about it. So you can come in and you can do these individual things by hand. You can do the button at the top to just say, just do me the defaults and let me see what happens. And I can absolutely promise you that I will occasionally give you a new release and break something. Okay, it happens a lot, right? I am not Microsoft. I do not take 6 years to release something. Okay, it happens in a very short window. And occasionally, I'm going to see something in an application. Someone's going to give it to me. I'm going to fix it here, and it's going to break another application because they do something a little bit weirder in that app, and I didn't think about it enough. So that's going to happen. That's great. When it happens to you, I want to hear about it. Customers do not give me enough of that feedback. When things aren't working, I want to know. So let me know about that. All right, so there is also the convert button that's up there. So that's how we're doing. We'll give you a push button. I don't have to even type the word PowerShell, Jim. I just give you a button. You pick the MSIX package and it'll convert it into any of those formats. All right. Now, in addition to using the GUI, there's also a command line interface to this thing. So, for example, I talked about that 120 apps that I have. When I run them through, I have an automated packaging for that 120 because the packaging tool has a remote capability. So I just have a big PowerShell script. It packages it up. It runs it through this and says, fix everything up for me. And then after about 4 hours, which is about a round of golf for me, which is perfect, I now have 120 packages I'm ready to test. Okay, this is the MSIX deploy tool. So you just point to, hey, where do I have my packages? It'll find them. It'll show you what PSF components are in there. If you want, it can actually check your signatures for validity. Although it just slows things down, so I just turn it off because I'm always perfect at the signing stuff, right? And then once you have them in, here's where you'd come in. You could right-click to do some of the troubleshooting. You can get at the manifest files in the package, the JSON file, which is how you control the PSF pieces. You can get command prompts or regedits running inside the bubble, kind of like what you used to do with AppV and the run virtual command, right? We're doing the same thing here. It's a different PowerShell command, something about something in desktop package. Run in desktop, not run because it's PowerShell. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so anyway, that's that stuff. All that important left on that demo. Come on. You're going to force me to find the. No, we do not want the demo a second time. Oh, that's one way to do it. Okay, so the other thing I have to talk about is the fact that we have an announcement. I mentioned the, come on, that's not the window I clicked on. There we go. I mentioned we have the command line interface. And so this year I've been integrating with a number of companies that are producing software to help you with the bigger picture of managing your applications. So originally Remo 3 and Jariba. So Remo 3 is doing a lot in terms of the testing aspect of it. How do you go through and get that UAT test and try to automate those pieces of it? Jariba is a company somewhere here in Europe. I think they're in the UK, if I remember right. But if you know the name Bob Kelly from the old App Deploy days, and then he was running the team there at Flexera, that's where he is. And so they're doing a bunch of stuff, and they're actually trying to look more at the front end of trying to make it easier for you to discover applications that need the updates and sort of automate that end of the process to get through the packaging piece. And so they've integrated the TM Edit X in there. And then AppCure is another company out of the UK. They're focused straight on MSIX. And their thing is time to package is their thing. But today we're announcing an integration with AppVentix. And I'm going to leave it to these guys to talk about that in the next section. But I think particularly with the announcements today with AppV not going away so soon, I think those guys are in a nice strong position with some of their tooling and being able to replace that AppV server. This makes sense. But these are the first guys that are actually integrating not only TM-Edit, but TM-Edit-X, but also TM-Edit in their workflow. So you have a single console to go through to help you take you through that process. So I think that's really cool. All right. So in October, at the AppVantage event, I created this slide, and I decided it was time to let people know that MSIX is ready for you. You know, that we can do 90% of X. We can't do them all. There is no technology out there that will deploy 100% of your applications to all of the places you might need to put them. Even an MSI, you know, you're not going to do the MSI on the RDS server or the pooled VDI unless you're baking it into the image itself, right? So there is no technology that can do 100%. Every customer I talk to always, oh, but you can't do 100%. They always did this with AppV as well, right? I can't do 100%, right? Why did Microsoft create MSIX? Well, it's because so many enterprises were saying, this is too hard. We need something better. We want to be able to do 100% of the applications. You're not going to get it. Okay? You're going to have at least a couple of different ways to deploy the applications. Right? But MSIX, I think, is at a point that you could, again, this is before the news changed today, but you could decide that it's ready for you to go out and start using as your first choice for packaging, and then fall back to something else when you need to. I still believe it's ready for that. Question for you becomes, should I? Right? And so, sort of, depending on where you are in your journey, right? So if you're using AppV today and you've been ignoring this end of life and haven't done anything yet, it's great news today. Okay, but don't take it as a reward that you can always ignore end of lives because they'll go away, because that's not going to work out very well for you. All right, but if you haven't started any type of migration, today is a great chance to just take a deep breath. Think about the fact that Windows 10 is going away this year. There's a new server coming out, and maybe I need to spend my time doing those things right now, and then I'll come back and think about it later. But if you were already in a migration, it may depend on how you're migrating. You know, some customers have been in that process. They're migrating to MSIX. And for them, okay, the pressure might be off, but they probably should just stay with that. If they're going to another vendor, you know, the Numescence, the Liquidwares, I just got an email from a guy. I didn't know the company was still around. No, not Turbo. Older than that. Endeavors Technology? Yes. Apparently they're still around. I had no idea. They must have 2 or 3 customers anyway. But if you go into one of them, you could say that path. That's just fine. I mean, I still feel that MSIX is a better technology in the long run because of the things I talked about at the beginning, making sure that when you bring applications down, nothing's going to break, making sure that they're isolated so that nothing else can break those applications. You get that little extra security stuff in there. I think the isolation is really, really important. And not all those technologies have those capabilities built into them. So the other thing I'm going to mention, and particularly for those of you who are on AppV, well, if AppV stays around forever, why would I go to MSIX? Not just those things, but the fact that the operating system is changing and changing and changing over time. So if you just take a look at a Windows 7 system and do a task manager, and count the number of SVC host processes, right? You take a look at it today on Windows 11, it's at least 2 times that number because of what Microsoft is doing to the operating system. They've been going from this monolithic thing to we have processes and we had these standard processes like all of those shell extensions. All those shell extensions used to run directly in the Explorer exe process that was running your desktop. So if any of those vendors put in a shell extension that was bad, it was really bad for the user, right? Now those things get split up. You know, Preview Host has its own thing. what's the other one? I don't know. There's a whole bunch of them in there. Generally, they're just SVC hosts. That one actually has a process name. But that they're splitting that up to help improve the security and the stability of your operating systems. And as Microsoft continues to evolve that, what you didn't necessarily hear today was that AppV is going to evolve with the operating system, right? AppV is going to try to keep the lights on, but they aren't necessarily going to evolve with the operating system. And I think by moving to that version of the packaging, which is native to Microsoft, native to the operating system, all the new stuff that they're doing that Jim talked about. By the way, why the heck does the calculator app, which is an MSIX app, update once a week? I can't figure that out. It updates once a week. What changes? I'm sorry. I just sorry. I lost my track of my thread. I have no idea what I was talking about right now. As these things are moving on, it's ingrained into the operating system itself, and getting yourself onto the native format that Microsoft, I didn't hear anything that changed that today. So I'm going to say that Microsoft has said is the future of applications is the way to go. Now, we did have a question, I think it was from you, about the where are the vendors on this, right? And here's my take on it. Oh, I was supposed to say this at the very beginning. I do not work for Microsoft. My opinions do not reflect upon Microsoft. This is me, right? So just make sure I said that. Oh, the vendors. Where are the vendors? So where do I see the vendors? The vendors, a lot of them tried to take their products and move them into MSIX, and they found the same type of problems that we were seeing in repackaging them. It was very difficult for them. I don't think they had the right information, and I think some of those applications aren't really good matches for MSIX, the way they are currently architectured. And so that didn't happen so much. I am seeing a lot of things on the developer forums from folks who are struggling with the end phase of getting some of their stuff out. But what I do see on all of these cases is these are people who are developing new applications. They're not taking the old and bringing it over. This is the new thing that they're building, and they're building it in .NET 5, 6, 7, 8, probably starting with 9 pretty soon. And that is a native MSIX format. So although they have an option for an unpackaged version, the default is it's a packaged version. And so I think we are going to start to see more and more of that as we go forward. Now, if Microsoft really wanted to move that industry forward in MSIX more, they would find a way to actually get Office out in MSIX format. They've been saying we're working on it for a while. I haven't actually heard anyone saying they're working on it for a while, but they haven't said they're not either. So I'm just going to go with the, yeah, they're still working on it piece. And we'll see what happens. But Microsoft has an option to help move that forward further than they've been able to do so far.
Hey, Teams and Outlook.
Hey, there you go. Oh, Outlook. Wait a minute. You mean the new Outlook? Yeah, okay, yeah. I dare you to try to teach my wife how to use the new Outlook. I dare you. Now, the real question for me is the bottom bullet. If I am a customer who's not using AppV today, and I'm going to a migration, I'm going to go to AVD, let's say, or some other type of migration. I'm getting rid of Citrix in my house, and I have to do some things. What should they do? I don't think anybody has a good answer for that right now. And I think it's going to take some time to figure that one out. I mean, I would certainly love to see them try to go to MSIX, but maybe that's not the right answer for them. Okay, that's actually my last slide. So I'm happy to take any questions. How do I do in time? Wow, not bad. Yeah. I did this presentation in 10 minutes in DC because they only gave me 10 minutes, believe it or not. No demo though. Yeah, Jim.
So I did try to automate the MSIX packaging tool. on a remote machine, so I can, from nothing, so I get a new version of XYZ app. I push it through the packaging tool and do some fixes with the PSF and try and automate it from end to end. Because as we know, applications may change versions, but they don't fundamentally change their architecture a lot.
Right.
Otherwise, it would be easy to change to MSIX, right?
Yep.
But one of the problems I've been running into is that the XML template file for automation that the MPT kicks out is like 5 schemas behind where the current MSIX technology is. So I have to then manually add in a whole load of stuff into the template file to kick it out. Do you have any tooling that could help with that sort of thing?
Yes. Okay. So the stuff that you're doing today is probably based out of the stuff that was in the MSIX packaging project on GitHub, right? Yeah. So I have a much updated version of that. That is exactly what I use for when I said I do the 120 apps. I just hit a button and go. Yeah, it takes care of the template. It creates a template dynamically, and then actually has the ability, because what I'll do is I'll not only create the package and then next feed it into M.A.D to fix it up, and then it had the ability on a per package basis for when you have that application you do over and over again type of thing. You already know what fixes you want or don't want. And so you can just add those command line switches on M.A.D to say, hey, I want this, I don't want this, whatever. And that's just part of the automation. So you have a little application record for each application in there when you want to run through the stuff that has those settings in place. And yes, I can share. In fact, I have an older version that I have shared. I don't think it was GitHub. I think I just I had a blog post on it, but I can certainly share with you what I have. Yeah.
I'll do some internal education.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah.
You mentioned that M.A.D became an integral part of such products as Remo 3, Appendix, and some Appear and so on. Mm-hmm. What about InstallShot and Advanced Installers? Are there any plans to integrate M.A.D into this packages?
Neither of them have, well, okay, so let me tackle them separately. The first would be Advanced Installer, and feel free to ask Bogdan that question when he's on a little bit later. I don't think they have the right architecture for that, because their tool was really a developer tool for creating installers. And so they have some stuff that's there, but it doesn't really work. They do have their own version of the PSF that they put in. Quite frankly, they had the best PSF in the early days for MSIX with some of the early work that they did. But I don't think it's as much of a focus on their part at this point. I think they didn't find enough revenue in that space, and so they're really focused on the developers a little bit more right now. So I don't think that one's appropriate. InstallShield you asked about. I've had some conversations. That's as far as I can put it. Okay. They have an architecture. It would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. You stated that MSIX is at around 9% success and FV as well. Are those the same applications or is there a difference? So
this is the same application, Jake.
Okay, so the 10% that doesn't work, it doesn't matter if you're using MSIX or FV, it's the same applications that don't work.
Well, that 91% number was against the 82% number. So I mean, it is a subset. Is it a pure subset? No, I think there were a couple of apps that worked under MSIX, but not AppV, but that's a rarity. Okay. Great question. No, I like it. Yeah.
Do you have a list of those 10% of applications that do not work? Is this always the same kind of application? Maybe some kind of special technology in it, and you say this one is not possible right now?
There actually isn't a good list. The applications that don't work just don't work, and we have no clue why. and there doesn't seem to be a lot of commonality into them. I mean, there are a few little things like applications that need to write to HKey local machine. We don't have a fix for that. So Bloomberg Terminal, the app we saw earlier today, I can't do that in MSIX, okay? I had asked Microsoft originally to do that work, to allow even if it was in the PSF, and they never did it. And the reason I asked them to do that is because when I started working with the PSF and fixing it up, I wanted to make some changes. The path for the redirection for file stuff is like horribly long before you start getting into the package, what's called the write redirection folder, right? It's like user, username, app data, local, packages, then the full name of the package, local cache, Microsoft, VFS, writable package root, and then any file that changes in your package now goes further off of there, right? I tried to move that and they shot me down and said, no, it has to stay there. And I was afraid that if I did a solution that's similar to AppV, where if they try to write to HKLM, we just do it in a HKey current user thing within their bubble thing and take care of that they decide that my path was wrong. And so they never did it. And it's one of those things that's on my list, right? But it's pretty far down my list because, you know, Bloomberg Terminal, what else needs to write to HKLM? That's a major app out there. Not that much anymore. But if I hear about more of them, like I heard about one this last week, you know, maybe that gets bumped up on the list. But for the most part, it's just we try the app, it doesn't work, and we have no idea why yet. Yes.
Yes. You saw the chart about, I think from the report, January this year, where you say 2 green ones.
Yeah.
And what was interesting, what I had from the discussions on it, just.
I'll go back. Just continue. We'll get there.
I mean, what we see, I mean, actually, well, we had a conversation, and in a lot of packages we see, it's just like, okay, I throw something in, I do my best to get something out, and that is my target. Right now, the target is 30% with that approach.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Maybe 35. But that means, then I had to also talk with the decision maker, saying, okay, if that point means I need to spend money on the resource to do something in addition to reach up to the 90%.
Right.
And that is just like something how that person is looking at it, saying, okay, how long does it take? I mean, with the tool, it's easy. Just like, hey, fix everything. I have no idea what you do, but if it works, thank you. But this is just like something, I mean, pressing a button is easy, not much cost intensive. But if it's not fixing it, and this is what we see quite often in our field, that is cost intensive to get the application done.
Oh, yeah.
At some point, they simply give up because they
Yeah.
say, hey, we
They,
see it
they don't go past this part of the chart, right? Yeah, they don't want to do that. Yeah, I had a customer at a big manufacturing company, and so they're outsourcing the initial packaging out to a part of the world where they got really, really cheap labor, right? And you know, if you think about call center people, they need a script when people call, right? And that's what they needed for these guys. And so that is actually what we gave them. We gave them, okay, run the packaging tool, just click, 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 click. Run this one command, click, ship us the package, we'll test it. And if it doesn't work, then we'll actually assign it to a real packager.
So, out of all the training courses you've done in your life and the customers you've talked to, if you were to give this audience here like 2 things to remember as to like if you've got a package that fails, try this, what 2 things would you recommend?
Okay. Number one piece of advice is that you better fix the image that you're packaging from. Absolutely. Every single customer that I start working with, they've got a machine that the baseline of the snapshot is dirty. And that when they go to package, stuff happens and they're capturing a bunch of stuff. I just love the ones I see where Edge updated in the middle of the package capture, right? So the standard exclusion list does not include, includes, takes out any files that Edge would have written into its own folders. That's part of the standard exclusions. All the COM objects that it's registered, well, those are just COM GUIDs under a classes key. We don't know what they're going to be. There's no exclusion possible for that. So when every one of their packages has all of these COM things that we can't possibly deploy out because the files just aren't there, right? So I see a lot of that. So that would be number one, is get your environment clean to start with. When you take those twice a monthly .NET framework updates from Microsoft, when that thing installs, MSIX files come down as what they call MSIL format. So it's basically a not fully compiled format, the EXE or the DLL you get. And then it puts a job into the NGen queue, which is a Windows service, to do the actual compilation for your environment. And they just stick them on the queue. And when the system becomes idle, it then does those compilations and it produces these files that are called .ni that are in your Windows assembly cache. And that's where the actual executable ends up being. Well, if you just take the updates and then say, okay, let me take my snapshot. Now, when you go to package, every single time you go in, you start the packaging tool, you start running your installer, you go read some email, your system becomes idle, all that stuff starts to get compiled, and you get 400 files extra in your package on every single package, right? So that's the type of thing there. All right, so that's just getting your environment straightened out. What is the second thing? Use the PSF. Okay, and when I add the PSF in, I mean, I'm analyzing here's why you need stuff, but if you just added, you have to have the launcher to start with, you're gonna do anything. You add the MFR fix-up and the Reg Legacy fix-up with the standard rules that I normally put in, and that's gonna cover most of those applications, right? Maybe not some of the stuff with like the COM objects, I got a lot of those. You may need to get fancier to get those things fixed up. But yeah, those would be the two pieces.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you.